Welcome everybody to Tuesday night spinal workshop. I'm Dr. Kristen Zawada. This is Monarch Family Chiropractic, and thank you all for joining us. We are going to dive right into talking about detoxification and cleansing and how valuable that is to our health and some different components on it. Now, this workshop could be hours long. So we're going to hit on a couple key topics. Some of these screens may seem familiar. Some of the topics are blended in with some of our nutritional conversations and workshops. So I may skip by those kind of fast, but all that data is here at the office. All those workshops or printouts you can get here when you come in, or email us and we can send you PDFs of them. So we're going to dive right into talking about what we're doing and what detoxification is doing and how to support our body in that cleansing, healthy way. So let's first just talk about what detoxification is. So it is a cleansing of the blood. It's removing impurities from the blood, and it's done through the liver. And that's where toxins are processed and eliminated. We also eliminate through our kidneys, right? Intestines, lungs, lymphatic system, right? That's that fluid system that's draining our eyes, ears, nose, and a lot of our system that goes also down to the kidneys to process our waste, right? Skin's is the biggest organ. So we excess and detoxify out our sweat as well. So if these symptoms are compromised, those impurities aren't properly filtered. So the body's affected by that and has to work harder to do its job. So why would we detoxify? And we were talking about this today in the office. We'll be talking about it all week as we talk about the 3 T's that chiropractic uses as the thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And of course, tonight with detoxification, we're focusing on the toxins, talking about what those are, what does the body need to get rid of, and why. So there's things that are in our foods, and we'll cover a little bit of that later, but that's usually a whole nother workshop. So they definitely have to look at things like pesticides and GMOs and sugar and the processed foods. And if you were on the workshop a few weeks ago or a month ago about that Doc did with all the different types of fats and the and oils and things that are poor fats for us, versus healthier fats. So those types of things cause toxicity, waste in our system that gets left behind as our body processes things. Of course, viruses, parasites, things like that. Environmental is huge, and it can be in multiple facets depending on what your environment is and what you're breathing in. So industrial, we could have heavy metals and a lot of different things there, but agriculture can see the same thing with so much of the pesticides and the chemistry that is polluting our air and polluting in a way, our food to try to preserve it from being eaten by bugs. So a lot of the things that we spray in our food also then get into our land, get into the soil, get into our water stream. So we've got to think about all the things environmentally, and especially metals, that create a toxicity in our body. Lifestyle things is also medications, that leaves chemistry in our body that is not natural to our body. So it has to process that. And a lot of times it stays into our intestinal walls and hangs out in the body, which then raises up chemistry levels that shouldn't be there and creates a toxicity in our internal system. So not only those, but things that we would be the chemistry that's in cigarettes, the chemistry that's in vaccines, even as a secondhand smoke. There's a lot of things you're inhaling that chemistry that you shouldn't be. If you're even just around or in a close environment with something coming through vents, say living in an apartment, someone next to you smokes in the apartment next to you, some of that's coming through the walls or the vents of your living quarters. So things like that. We also have to look at lifestyle things that we think about that might be, we're trying to be healthy and maybe be cleanly, right? And have good hygiene, but what are we using to clean? Our clothes, our detergents, body products, things that just have perfumes and a lot of chemicals in them. There are so many chemicals, and Doc's got a fact there of 84,000 that have been made in the last 50 years. And I'm sure that's higher now with just the way technology is and the way in which we're advancing things and the way we want to see things change. There's a lot of chemistry that comes with that. Many things that are not banned here are banned in other parts of the world. Europe has a lot of things that they don't allow to be in their foods, in their drinks, and their environment for reasons that we should and just don't, based on mass production. So I'm sure numbers are different depending on where it is you reside and where you live and even what country you live in. But many things are tested and show adverse effects. And yet, because of the mass production we do here, they're still in our system, in our environment, and are not necessarily banned by the FDA. So we have to look about what it takes, how fast it takes for chemicals to enter our bloodstream, and then what happens when they're there. So we're going to dive into the liver briefly, and then we're going to come back to it and talk about how important this phase is to happen, because detoxification is really about something building up, right? A chemistry reaction, and how if it stays in our system, that's when the chemistry becomes harmful and needs detoxified. So the buildup of that, really the liver is doing this process, and there's pathways, but the phases have to happen that something goes that's fat soluble has to be made water soluble in order to eliminate fully from our body and leave it, and not just go migrate to another place in our body. So I'm not going to go through all the metabolic processes here, but there's things that that you can see in the fat soluble list. We need to get them water soluble. So many things that we ingest or take in don't become water soluble without a process that our body needs to do. So those things build up in our system, and then again create that toxicity. Everything's going to need to filter some way and eliminate some way. So a lot of times, if we can get it through as a water soluble, then our bowel, our bladder, our, kidneys, gallbladder, all that area or organ systems, excuse me, can do their job and eliminate it fully out of our system. So let's talk about, so when you're in a taxed liver, what might you expect to see, or what might you feel? Because again, symptoms vary. Some people don't have symptoms, and something's low level, like we talk about, even with subluxation, right? And nerve interference, most people do not feel subluxations. You may feel an effect of a subluxation. And eventually that turns into something more noticeable, but it may start with a barrage of symptoms because the body is working too hard, right? So a overtaxed or sluggish liver can express its ways in many of the ways you see there, from a headache to migraine, with heavy levels of things that can create that type of a response, if you will. But many times digestive problem, because so much of the immune system and in this process is happening in the gut, or not happening and detoxifying out of the gut, right? So you may feel a lot of fatigue, again, because we said skin's the biggest organ. You may see things like irritations on the skin, eczema, anything inflammation, right, is caused by an overworking part of the system or too much taxing on the system. Body can't process. An overactive immune system can also express in ways besides what's on this slide, in conditions that we see in autoimmune conditions, right? So something been there taxed and toxic for a long time may show up as, multiple sclerosis, might show up as lupus, may show up as things like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, Hashimoto's, so things with thyroid, but a lot of chronic fatigue and things that can really tax the system that way. So keying to detoxifying is really, what are we doing at the cell level? So this is where I'm going to focus more of this conversation for about the next 10-15 minutes, is because I want to explain a process called glucuronization. And this is where there's a couple other slides that may have, the pictures may show you, may make more sense to what's happening. But when a body cannot take something fat soluble, we cannot just make it water soluble without certain elements in our diet, without certain elements in chemistry in our system. So it's really important that an example I use a lot is when somebody is trying to lose weight. If there's a toxic level in the system, the cells are the cells. You have the same amount of cells. They just may be smaller or shrunken if you lose things within them, right? So if you lose fat within them, because the fat can go somewhere, or something fat soluble can be gotten rid of, then the cell just shrinks. It's not like we lose fat cells or cells. So when a body is toxic, we store toxins in our fat cells. They're further away from big organ systems. So what we need to do is not just move them around in areas, which is sometimes why if someone's trying to say lose weight, things may just come down a bit or they just shift where they're carrying it. It's a matter of getting that toxic stuff out of the cell so that it can be water soluble and be flushed out completely. If a body is toxic and we're shrinking cells that don't have the toxins in them, then the body stays more toxic than the body should be into that toxic cell ratio, if you will. So a lot of times when people plateau, it's because the body innately knows I can't be more toxic than fat, if you will, or other components. So other cellular components in different cells. So it's not going to let that ratio become more toxic than not. So somebody will plateau in being able to move. So when we need to make things fat soluble into water soluble, this process has to happen. So a glucarate is a part that covers the cell. A toxin attacks that cell. The harmful substances need to be removed from the cell, right, and made water soluble. So eliminated from the body, then sometimes a harmful enzyme can come back in and reverse that process. So it releases toxins back into the body. So we need a product or a process with glucarate from the cell bond that takes that enzyme and basically prevents that action from happening again or rehappening. So there are with glucarate or this glue, I may actually be saying that wrong now that I'm looking at the spelling of the word. Glucuronidization. It's a long syllable word. Let's see if we've got a slide that better explains. Yeah. So I utilize a product or a supplement because calcium deglucarate and things like this are in our diet. They're in fruits and vegetables. We just don't get enough of that and enough to usually do this detoxifying level. So when we're trying to cleanse a cell or cleanse and get some of that stuff transferring its solubility, then we need this process to happen. So there are times that just supplementing for this cellular detoxification, so that again, we're doing this at the cell level. We're not just trying to do a kidney or a liver cleanse. Your fat and your toxic cells are all over the body. So yes, they're targeted in certain areas, but they can deposit all over the body. So this calcium deglucarate is a component that helps with this process. So glucuronidization is the natural process that the body, in which it takes that toxin and makes it water soluble, right? So it can be more easily flushed out of the body. And again, when I describe this picture in this process, you need these three different components of that process to fully cleave the bond, if you will, of the toxin from the cell, and then kind of close that gap so that it just doesn't want to come back and reattach. So when it talks about the calcium deglucarate, the beta-1,3 glycans and the mammalian peptides, this is all about how these chains of glucose molecules work and how they attach basically, and how they're extracted in different things. So the beta-1,3 glucans is doing things, activating immune cells by connecting directly with the receptors on that immune cell and promoting that activity. So what that picture is showing is this process, and the mammalian peptides have to kind of close that loop. They're when we talk about your killer T cells, and we talk about how with an immune boost, with an adjustment, those white blood cells go up. There's a component here with the mammalian peptides that it's looking at things that we're deriving to make that response or that invader more recognizable. It's like taking the blinders off the cell and saying, hey, I recognize what's me going by, and I recognize what's not me, what's harmful, what's virus, what's bacteria, what's a mutated cell, right? Like a cancer cell, things like that. So we have to our body has to recognize that. And if that white blood cell count is up and those killer T cells are on alert, it's like the blinders are off the cell. So when you have this process happening, we need to basically separate that, cleave that bond of that toxin, remove it, change its chemistry to where it's water soluble, and then kind of close up that bond so that it doesn't reattach. So that's a process that's really important that our body goes through in order to cleanse and fully detoxify and not just move things around. So I'm going to throw these slides up, which are in multiple different workshops that we do, but it is important to know that there are things to avoid, right? And there are things to focus on. And so the food matters list really just shows us things that we should be avoiding and shouldn't be in our diet, or again, in small amounts. So again, this is in a lot of the nutrition workshops that we have posted, but again, looking at different trans fats, looking at things, sorry, I put my glasses on to see some of that. High fructose corn syrup, you know, we know aspartame, we know all of the chemistry behind that causing cancer in rats that are tested with a lot of these chemicals that are in our foods. So knowing what to be looking for on your labels and knowing what to be eliminating and or
an appointment with you to go to a water sports dealer.
Doing much less, having much less in your diet. The Dirty Dozen or the Clean 15. This is another brief list that we talk about in a lot of the nutrition workshops. Again, what kind of things are going to deposit things into your food, and even some of the things that we know in a sense are healthy when we think about fruits and vegetables. Many of the ones that are more contaminated based on how they're sprayed or how we get them delivered to us in that Dirty Dozen are ones that we want to make sure we're washing, make sure we're maybe it's not the higher quantity of things we're eating versus other vegetables and fruits. And then the Clean 15 are the things with less contaminants. So hopefully that list gives you some things to look at as we go into finally spring and summer, and we're going to have foods more in season, hopefully more affordable, and being able to, you know, eat some things that are in a riper time of the year, and looking at things that maybe you have more of that you could swap for something else. Sorry, I just lost my screen changing tab. So there's also components of things that we really want to limit, you know, our exposure to. So things that are processed, and things that we want to watch and that we know more about if it's grown locally, right? And maybe where we're getting it from, how it's being treated or not being treated. Having things that are fermented, unpasteurized dairy products, things like that. Having more raw foods in our diet. And again, things we talked about and Doc talked about a few workshops ago, which was just really honing in on what the healthy fats are and what are not, and what their sources are, and then the omega-3s, all things that are supportive to that. And again, more local community supportive things in farmers markets where we're getting things in that haven't traveled as far, and we may know more about how they're being prepared by the time they get to us. So cleansing and detoxing, there's a couple different things that Doc and I have used, that we have in the office, that we recommend. And there are multiple products out there, I guess I would say, and companies that address this. We have a couple of the medical medium and books in here. The Whole Food 30 is another way of doing some cleansing and detoxing, especially from a component of getting rid of sugar in our diet. Anything that sugar brings a lot of inflammation into the system, so that will aggravate all things. And you cannot, in a sense, reduce your size or detox your system when it's in an inflamed state. So that's a really big component in looking at sugar, or even just typing in what a low glycemic index or diet consists of, and pulling foods from that component, that list of things. So a structured detox or cleanse is something that I think everyone should do under some supervision, especially if you've never done it, and looking at guidelines of different companies that are well supported and do this in a very healthy way. So this is not go, you know, drink grapefruit juice or lemon juice and honey for the next 7 days, or, you know, some of the ridiculous things that are out there. So there's lots of different protocols. I tend to gravitate between standard process and the Surrenda protocol. That is one that's clean burn shape is what they call it. It's really about supporting a couple processes of the body that no matter how long you're cleansing or what your maybe end goal is, that we do it in a healthy way. And a sustainable way, and something that makes sense. So I guess I'll leave you with a couple things that are about ways in which you can cleanse or processes in cleansing. Because so much of our digestive system is in the gut, it is really important that for our body to process, absorb nutrients, and not be inflamed and do things in a healthy way with our foods. We've got to be able to absorb the proper things. If I can go back, oh, that slide may not have made it into this workshop. Yeah, I don't think I got it added. So in looking at something like your digestive enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics, I feel like that always has to be a key component when we're trying to cleanse the system. You need enzymes to break down foods properly. And there's 31 enzymes within our gut that we need to have a balanced level of. It is also important that you have like pre and probiotics for supporting different levels of the gut, especially if any of those things on this slide are happening and are in your world on a daily basis. So taking medications on a daily basis, depending on what you clean with, what you're around, what your exposure is to things. I really think people should cleanse quarterly or seasonally, even if it's a small version of it, and maybe they do a bigger version of it, you know, once or twice a year. So in a very healthy way, there are programs that you can do that support the component of, we need to support the gut, we need to clean out things that are building up in there. And a lot of times having a very well-rounded pre and probiotic and digestive enzymes, you're balancing all the levels and you're making sure you're not pulling away from. It's really important no matter what you use. I feel like that it has something that has a systemic component, which really is about allowing what you have in that probiotic or prebiotic to make it to the digestive system and not get killed off, if you will, by all the acidity in the stomach that it hits first. So you need something that's got the ability to withstand the stomach acid and get into the intestinal components to do its job and to help balance that flora. So there are products that we use in the office that do that. So that is certainly a component you can chat with us about. When I look at, through some of my notes of different cleansing components. Guess those are all digestive. Yeah. There's also components of what I use in that line of products. That is what I do when I cleanse, if it's not standard process. It is this clean burn shape component. And why I like it is that it's addressing things, eating real foods, supporting with really good omegas, really good vegetarian and vegan components that get you good proteins, really good fats, really good fibers, doesn't taste like dirt, and that you can incorporate in with other real foods. So it's mostly about clean eating, but it's about supporting kind of four components, the digestive enzyme to really help balance the gut and decrease the inflammation, get the right gut flora going on there. When you work on something that has antioxidants and good herbs that helps detoxify, it has things like aloe, ashwagandha, turmeric, rhodiola, licorice root, things like that, things that are very supportive in detoxification and regularity, but don't cause that adverse effect, I feel like, of what sometimes cleansing does, to really turn the gut upside down, if you will. There's a component where you want to have healthier, higher energy levels and work on what your healthy blood glucose level is. And so certainly eating less sugars will help that, but there's also a component that can really help support normal intestinal glucose absorption that sometimes isn't happening. And to support that, you need liberation of that from the liver. So this is where if the liver's taxed, it can't do that process naturally and as well. So when you have those two components happening, absorption and glucose can be liberated within and in the liver, it can support that normal process. So it helps maintain a healthy glycemic index or effect. And then when you can do that, you burn fat. Your body's more efficient and your fat burning system has the support it needs. The component of What they call the shape is really just that you're supporting good nutrients into your body, whether you do it in a shake kind of component or real foods. But if you're trying to detox or cleanse, you really need to give the liver and kidneys a break, and the intestines too. So if the body's processing a lot of foods, a lot of things that it has to break down in the intestines, then the liver and kidneys aren't really getting a break. They're still doing a lot of work. So it just helps for them to have a break and do more, in a sense, juicing or protein shakes, things that your body doesn't have to work so hard to break down these proteins and fats. So getting healthier versions of those, and sometimes those kind of ways, is an easy way to do gentle cleansing throughout the week, or on the weekend for that matter. And I'm going to end with showing you a couple pictures, of which I didn't put in the slideshow, but reading off a set of symptoms a patient came to me with, and I would say it was 2008, probably 2009 at the latest, probably 2008. That when I started working on using this immune supplement and these cleansing supplements, it was when I had probably one of my most challenging patients to date. And she put together a page for me that I'm going to read some of to you, that she called The Price of Getting Sick, 25 years searching for relief from fibromyalgia. So it talks about how this is usually a cascading effect for people. So sometimes when a body needs to truly cleanse or detox, it's taken it years to get to certain levels. And that's why it can be so frustrating to feel like nothing's working or allowing it to change. So for her high blood pressure, which is where some of it started, she was given Lipitor. Acid reflux, surgery, fundo, I don't even know how to pronounce that word. Besides drugs, they had done a surgery on the esophagus and the start of the stomach, with inflammation and some of the constipation. She was given over-the-counter stuff, or Celebrex, depression, Cymbalta, anxiety, Cymbalta, neuropathy, gabapentin. Then muscle pain was a barrage of, different class of levels of drugs, but whether it was just, I can't think of, I lost the name. It'll come back to me. Basically then when a toxicity level gets high, it's not uncommon for someone to have headaches, to have a lot of fatigue, to be given things for that, or just to create a caffeine or a sugar addiction because you're trying to stay awake, because you just feel blah, you feel like you can't run and you feel fatigued. So just trying to up energy with even just caffeinated things. Then insomnia took place, so Ambien was delivered. There was tons of things like water retention meds that were given for then just having a lot of fluid retention and feeling puffy and looking swollen. Then came reproductive issues, because it was after kiddos, and things started showing up that way because the chemistry in her system was just anything but regular. So estradiol, because that was what she needed once they, took her uterus out and did a hysterectomy. Digestive issues, gallbladder surgery was the answer for them, to this patient. And then it even became a barrage of a bunch of other things. Then there's so much weight and inflammation in the system that she snored all the time when she slept. So she was on a CPAP machine trying to breathe, so that is a lot of money, a lot of medication, and somebody who was a shell of a body. When I met her, she was just a walking zombie. 10 months, maybe after we started working together, between 9 and 10 months of doing really consistent care and slowly introducing how to cleanse and detox her system. Her pain levels were at 8, 9 on a daily basis out of 10. And we're at about a 3, 4 on a daily basis after about 9, 10 months. So the other things that always were the, improvers was, she then slept, had energy to get through the day. The quote that I still have is, It was wonderful to be participating, excuse me, in life again, instead of just going through the motions. She was 50 and maybe 56 then when I met her. But 50 was when, like, the holy crap, what's going on? Let's start to try to figure this out. So the statement she came up with, she gave me, that I wrote down that I'll never forget, was drugs chase symptoms. Instead of swatting flies around a dying carcass, why not focus on making the animal healthy and the flies will go away? So this is a patient that's just still really near and dear to my heart. And I think that within seeing her life change and being able to, with 25 plus years of that kind of life, and it becoming to that level, to see that within like a year and a half, her health completely around, focusing on the right things, supporting her nervous system, adding in all the things we asked her to do, cleaning up what she had in the cabinets, taking things out of her home that didn't need to be there, chemistry wise, and then starting in on a way to slowly detox the sludge that was literally killing her, slowly, maybe not so slowly, is what had to happen. And to see that kind of change happen in, like I said, under 2 years in a really healthy way, just shows how much this is really what we should be talking to patients about, really something they should be getting support in. And I'm telling you, it's just, if you haven't experienced it, it's not what patients are being told, or where they go to a clinic and they get any of these resources, I feel like, that we've, even half of what we've talked about today. So hopefully getting some information to say there are ways and things to do, and there are healthy ways to do it, and there are places to go to focus on it, and things that we can look at that help support you, pushes you to take one thing out of maybe one of these slides and implement that into your routine, your regimen, your diet, or find something that you're like, I'm going to eliminate that for 30 days or 90 days and see what happens. We know that there's just so much benefit in obviously what we put in if we want something good to come out of that. And there's no point in taxing our bodies with more than we already do. So from that level of what we put in it or what we give it, let's just be mindful of that and see if there's things that we can take out or put in, or even just add slowly, that help that slow detoxification process happen. So we don't have that buildup of things that create things that, nobody wants to experience, and slow down in life, right? If we don't have to. So if there's any of those kind of slides, lists, product information, any of that you guys would like, please chime in. Please either email the office or let us know when you're here, and I can send, any of these slides or QR codes to people if there's interest in looking at some of these cleansing programs that we have all in the office used, and however we can support you in a better you. So thank you for joining us on Tuesday night for this workshop, and I will open it up for questions if we have any. Oh, maybe.